girls have a gluten-free baking business. And so they were making all these sweet treats to take to the farmer's market. And I was finishing them off when we got home, cookies, cakes, you name it. And so my birthday rolls around, my 48th birthday, and they make my favorite gluten-free cupcakes. And so they said, do you want us to make cupcakes? And I said, yes, double the batch, please, because that's where I was. And I ate 20 cupcakes in 36 hours.
Welcome to the Protecting Your Nest podcast. We are in the second month of the new year, and many of you believe in New Year's resolutions, but are already struggling to keep them, even though the year is just starting. There are so many reasons why my patients have struggled. Some of those reasons include not having clearly defined goals, like SMART goals, goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Others struggle because they are trying to make lifestyle changes on their own and lack a support system, someone or a group who will not only make them accountable, but who will also lift them up when struggle occurs. We are often ready to make change, but are not prepared. We may struggle, especially when we face those inevitable obstacles that we're all going to face. Now, many of my patients started the new year with a focus on improving metabolic health, some starting with low carb, while others are going all the way to a lion or carnivore diet. Either way, today I want to talk to a guest who's been there and done that, so we can pick her brain about what areas we should or should not be concerned about, especially if adopting a keto or carnivore diet. Today's guest is Serena. Serena is a mom of 4 who is doing the incredible job of homeschooling her beautiful children. She has suffered from bulimia and binge eating, but when she changed to an animal-based diet, she was able to heal from both. She's now spreading her healing story on the Carnivore Revolution YouTube channel. And Serena, I am so happy to have you today as my guest on the Protecting Your Nest podcast. So welcome.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. I was very honored when you asked me to be a guest. So I'm really glad to be here.
Absolutely. Well, of course, you're out there doing great work. I'm trying to do the same. And we have to kind of function a little bit like a tribe. We have to, maybe share our message on each other's platform. But more importantly, I think every guest has a different perspective, and yours is going to be good to hear from today. Impressed with your ability to raise those 4 kids. But when I heard you were homeschooling them, I was like, ooh, she's a super woman. So we did see, me and my wife saw Wonder Woman. So maybe you have a shield and some ankle braces to kind
I
of.
should totally get a shield.
That's right. So let's start there. Let's talk a little bit about what is it like to have the challenge of raising 4 kids? That's already a challenge, but then homeschooling, it just seems like that keeps you so busy. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I think when I started homeschooling, we had 2, and they kind of missed our oldest kind of misses the deadline for schooling. And so her birthday's in October, and the deadline for schooling here is September 30th to kind of go into kindergarten at that age. And I'm really kind of a control freak. Like, I couldn't imagine putting her, and for most people this is normal and I get it, but I couldn't imagine putting her on a school bus at the end of our driveway at almost 5 years old. And because we could have gotten her in that year if we wanted to, we could have fought it and gotten her in. But I couldn't imagine putting her on that bus and sending her off to be with strangers for 8 hours a day. And even if I had driven her, because people will say, well, you could have taken her. Yeah, I could have taken her. I could have driven her. But I couldn't imagine her going off and being away for that long. And at that point, so she was almost 5, and I also had a 3-year-old, and I was pregnant. And I just couldn't imagine that being okay with me for her to be gone all day. And so that's really how it started. Was we had this extra year. It felt like we had this extra year because kindergarten, she wasn't supposed to start kindergarten until the following August. And so we had this extra time, and we said, well, we'll just go ahead and try it and see how it goes. And if we don't like it, or, we'll have her tested at the end of the year. And if it doesn't look like she's doing well, we'll go ahead and send her. And we tested her at the end of the year, and her scores were great. She was excelling. She was able to read and write. She had started reading and she was writing. And so we felt really good about it, and then decided to go ahead and start our son. And every year, up until I would say the last 4 or 5 years, we were just kind of taking it year by year. Like, we weren't 100% committed until graduation, but we felt like it was the right choice. We didn't have, huge reasons. Like, we're not against the school system or anything like that. I just wanted to be with our kids. I feel like raising our kids is our responsibility as parents, and everybody doesn't agree with that, and everybody can't stay home with their kids and homeschool them, and I understand that. But I think even if you can't do that, we should be as involved as humanly possible, because they are trying to take our kids. And again, I don't have
Mhm.
like a hard wall against public school. I just feel like you have to be involved. You have to know what they're learning. You have to know who their friends are. There is so much. I feel like I would have spent more time and energy trying to be involved with school than I put into homeschooling because I feel like I would have been a homeroom teacher. I mean, a homeroom parent while they were in elementary school. I feel like I would have been there every day. That would have been harder for me because I went on to have two more children after we started homeschooling. And so it would have been harder on me to go to the school to check on them every day. I'm just That's just who I am. I wanted to be with them, and it's a decision that we will never wish that we could change. We homeschooled our first two through graduation. They have both gone on to be very well-adjusted adults, and then we have two other ones, a 17-year-old and a 15-year-old, and they're pretty much well-adjusted adults. They're very mature. They can have a serious conversation, looking an
Mhm.
adult in the eyes. They're not uncomfortable with other people. There's all these homeschooling myths and homeschooling stereotypes. And I really don't feel like those are mostly true. The socialization thing, we have actually had to pull
Mhm.
back on socialization
Right.
because we're free all the time. Like we can say, oh, well, we won't do school today, or, we'll double up tomorrow, or let's take the first 2 days of the week off. It's a beautiful spring day. Let's just go sit in the sun and read.
Mm.
Or, we have so much freedom to be able to kind of do whatever we want. And that's important, and that's really great. And that teaches our kids that life is flexible, right? Not everybody goes into an office and works, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday in these strict hours anymore. And so I think it gives our kids more flexibility for their future, and it gives them not all kids in school are bad. People have really good kids that go
Mhm.
to school, but
That's
nowhere
right.
else in your life are you going to only be surrounded by people that are in your age group, right? Once you go to
That's
work, you're not going
right.
to work with people that are just in your age group.
You
And
got
so
that
I feel
right.
like doing it the way we've done it, we had, four kids all in the same house. We did co-ops where we went once a week and met with other parents and each taught a different subject. So they were with kids of all different
Mhm.
ages and things like that. So we love being able to take the day off and go to the park or go to the trail and take the dog for a walk. And we've loved homeschooling, all the way through. And so 3 years and we'll be done. And it will have been something that, we look back on with fond memories, and that we got to be with them all this time. We've got to take vacations when everybody else was in school. Just making our own schedule. There's a huge benefit to being able to make your own schedule too. So we've loved it.
Serena, you filled my cup with that first answer. I mean, because it really made me think about I wonder how many people listening had not thought about the flexibility
Hmm.
component of working from home, which is normally what I do uh,
Hmm.
today. We're recording this on Valentine's Day. So for
Hmm.
those who are listening, even though it'll be after Valentine's Day, I want to wish you a belated Valentine's
Yeah.
Day. But I don't have to worry about the bullies. I don't have to worry about, maybe if one kid's sick or
Hmm.
maybe they need more sleep. Maybe we
Hmm.
can do a family field trip together. You can learn from your kids. You just threw out so many nuggets, and I just think for those who have never tried that, I
Hmm.
think that's what connects us when we can just see the world through other people's lens and answer their why question. And
Hmm.
there's always pros and cons of everything we do in life. But I just love the fact that you share so many nuggets, and that really gave me some cool perspective. So thank you for that. And
Absolutely.
and let's dive into, why you became a YouTuber, why you decided to eat carnivore. And for those who are checking this out, I've had several carnivore guests lately. It seems like once I kind of dove into those waters, the carnivores kind of came along. So I'm all about low carb, keto, and carnivore, but I just want to say that out loud. I've met a lot of wonderful people because of my change towards that dietary pattern. I just want people to understand you don't have to go all the way to carnivore. You have to do what's best for you. Just be willing to do the experiment. So why carnivore for you? And maybe touched on your YouTube channel and how carnivore inspired you to do that work as well.
Okay. I have no idea how I ended up with a YouTube channel. So, so I was a disc jockey before I had kids. I was a disc jockey on the radio, and so for me, the talking thing comes natural. That my
That's
high school
easy.
had a radio station. I was in a journalism class, and so and I've always been a talker. Like people have always talked about how much I talk. So if I get long winded, you feel free to stop me. I'm a very, very proficient, and I speak very quickly. So if I'm going too fast, also you slow me down.
You're good.
So
That's wonderful.
so the YouTube thing, I was just kind of doing little videos on my own just because, once you find something that works, you want to share it with people. And I feel silly saying it, but I had already done this two other times, with a juicing group that's 10,000 members strong on Facebook. And also, and I had a YouTube channel for juicing because I thought that it was a miracle and I thought that it was amazing and I thought it was healing me. And then another time I started posting little videos on Instagram about Weight Watchers because I felt like it was
Mhm.
working and it was really
Yeah.
controlling my food. And so I had done this a couple of other times in the last few years prior to becoming a carnivore. But carnivore, it just changes things. It changes you, it changes your brain. And so I started just posting my meals, thinking, so like the way I found carnivore was through other carnivores that were doing what you and I are doing right now.
Mhm.
And once it changes your life so much, so
Mhm.
strongly, you feel like you have to share that with other people. And so I was doing Instagram things and I met somebody. We did something together on Instagram and it worked out great. We had a great rapport. And so we decided we would start this YouTube channel together. She has since moved on and decided that the YouTube channel wasn't something that she really wanted to do anymore. And so I have stuck with it. For most of 2023, I was pretty much on my own and just decided that I was going to do more interviews, get more people like you on, to people who people can look at and respect. Like people see me sometimes and they say, why would I listen to some chick I found
Mhm.
on YouTube?
Mhm.
But they see me talking to a doctor who has really good advice, and that kind of changes the perspective a little bit. And so that's how I started. Was I found Kelly Hogan was first, and then Laura Spath, and then Sean Baker on the Joe Rogan podcast, which is how like 95% of people find carnivore. And so
Yeah.
that puts gives it merit. That makes people
Mhm.
listen when it's a doctor, right? And so that's how I started. So I had been bulimic for about 20 years in
Mhm.
the past, even after I had kids. I was a binge eater, a chronic dieter, a chronic undereater, and then, of course, an overeater at times when I was binging. And so I had tried all these different things. I had tried juicing and I really thought that it was helping me. And like I said, I had done every diet, you name it, the cabbage soup diet, Weight Watchers, intermittent fasting, longer fasts. I mean, you name it, I had tried the diet. And it was almost always to lose weight to be healthier, but never to be healthier in general. And so once I started thinking about those kinds of things, I actually did what would be considered carnivore about 6 or 7 years ago without knowing that's what I was doing. A doctor put me on a low carb diet. And because I'm an all or nothing person, when he said eat, 50 grams of carbs a day, I thought, well, if 50 grams of carbs is good, then zero must be better. And so I started trying to eat zero carbs. And that was what I did for about 7 months. And I felt really good. But of course, went right back to like Weight Watchers or something after that. And then, so on my birthday weekend, about almost 3 years ago in May, I was having a hard time. I was turning 48. I was feeling 48. I was waking up in the morning and hitting snooze 3 or 4 times on my alarm, even though I was juicing. 75% of
Mhm.
my plate was vegetables. I was lean chicken breast was the other side of my plate. I probably hadn't had red meat in several years, or at least just a few times in several years, because it's bad for you. And so I was really trying to do what was right, but I was waking up and sitting on the end of my bed and I know people are going to be able to relate to this, sitting on the end of the bed, like you sit up and you're like, I guess this
Mhm.
is what 48 feels like, like
Mhm.
just feeling like that. And you got to get up slowly and stretch your back a little bit before you make your way to the bathroom to get in the shower. Just like you can feel it that you're getting older. And I didn't like that. And I also had this weird post sickness that shall not be named issue where things tasted and smelled rotten, like skunk. For it ended up lasting 2 years and 8 months, but this was a little more than a year into that. I was depressed. I was sad. uh, Mostly what I could eat was things that were made from sugar because those were the things that didn't taste and smell so bad.
Mhm.
They were the only things. Meats, eggs, chicken. I could eat a hamburger fresh off the grill, and I could eat a steak, only a New York strip fresh off the grill, but I couldn't eat a ribeye, and I couldn't eat either of those two things if I had to rewarm them. Like if I made a bunch of burgers and put them in the fridge, I couldn't eat them the next
Mhm.
day. I had to make a fresh one, some sort of chemical reaction when you refrigerate it, but it smelled like skunk. Coffee,
Mm.
peanut butter, garlic, onion, popcorn, many things tasted and smelled. It was horrible. It was all the time. And so I was having a really, really hard time. And I was sick of dealing with it. And I was gaining weight because I was just eating mostly sugar. And so this was actually, I think this was maybe 4 months into that, not a full year. This was about 4 months into that. But it was hard. I was depressed. I was crying every day. It's life altering to have that going on all the time. And so I was already in a bad place. And because I could only eat sugar, I was only eating sugar. Like my girls have a gluten-free baking business. And so they were making all these sweet treats to take to the farmer's market. And I was finishing them off when we got home, cookies, cakes, you name it. And so my birthday rolls around, my 48th birthday, and they make my favorite gluten-free cupcakes. And so they said, "Do you want us to make
Mm.
cupcakes?" And I said, "Yes, double the batch, please," because
Mm.
that's where I was. And I ate 20 cupcakes in 36 hours. I was so sick. So binging can be walking
Wow.
through the kitchen every 30 minutes or hour and picking up a cupcake and eating it where nobody can see you. Or it can be the image that you already have in your head of binge eating, which is somebody very overweight surrounded by all this junk food and they're just kind of shoveling it in. But binging can be much more gradual than that and slower. It doesn't have to be all in one sitting. So that was a huge binge for me that lasted
Yeah.
36 hours because I was eating things in between too, but I wanted those cupcakes more than I wanted anything. And I was sick and mentally and physically, I feel like, and so Monday morning, so my birthday was on a Saturday, so that was a Saturday and a Sunday. I ate all those cupcakes, and my husband and I went to our favorite trail to run on Monday morning, and I came home and I was laying out in the sun on our back porch at like 8:30 in the morning, because spring, it was getting pretty out, it was really nice. And I thought, okay,
Mhm.
pull yourself together. You got to stop doing this. You can't eat just sugar. So if sugar is the only thing that you can eat, besides that hamburger and that steak, then you're going to have to just eat the hamburger and steak. Fruits and
Mm.
vegetables tasted and smelled rotten. I mean, it was the most bizarre thing. My husband came home from work one time and found me in our camper crying because our daughter was in the house making eggs and I couldn't even be in the house. It was so bad. So I said, okay. So if I can only eat those two things that don't have carbs in them, then that's what I'm going to eat. I'm just going to eat that
Mhm.
steak and that burger. And then I thought, what happens to me if I eat this way? And so I started doing research, and that's how I found Kelly Hogan and Laura Spath and Sean Baker and Joe Rogan. And then that led me down this rabbit hole. And I literally was out on my porch for like 3 hours with my AirPods in, just listening to YouTube video
Mhm.
after YouTube video and, going to Instagram and listening to things and watching things. And I spent 3 hours. And then for the rest of so that was it. I had already switched in my head. That's what I was going to do. I was going to eat those two
That's right.
things, and that's what I did. Like I made the decision, and that's what I did. And so it was very matter of fact for me at that point. But I spent
Mhm.
weeks with an AirPod in, listening to some sort of video, regardless of what I was doing, whether I
Mhm.
was cleaning the house or sitting in the sun or going for a walk or running at our trail or whatever it is that I was doing. I was listening to something and learning things about it and why this works and how it's possible. And so for me, the switch had already been flipped because I was done with sweets that morning. I made the decision I
Mhm.
was done. But many people need more coercing. They need, to listen to videos and watch things. And for me, it actually happened the other way around. And it was about 6 months in. So I was just kind of doing it. I was cruising along. It was mandatory for me. There was nothing else I could eat. Within a
Mhm.
couple of months, I could add eggs in. I think it took about 6 months before I could add chicken in. But around the 6 month mark, I was listening to something on Instagram and I was listening to Katie Kelly on Instagram. And I heard her say something about the difference between an abstainer and a moderator. And it
Mhm.
was like, that's when I made the connection that I was better, that I wasn't sick anymore, that I
Mm.
wasn't bulimic. I wasn't binging. I hadn't been bulimic for a while, but
Mhm.
I still had very distorted eating, like
Mhm.
the binging and then the fasting for 2 days to punish myself, or the only eating salads for a week to punish myself, or a 14-day juice fast. I mean, I had very distorted eating for a long time. And I feel like that still follows me a little bit into carnivore. I'm always looking for a challenge. Like, I'm always looking for like, okay, I'm going to do ribeyes only this month, or I'm going to do
Mhm.
the lion diet for 30 days, or, I still kind of do that, but there's no punishment at the end. It's just reward. So I guess that's okay. But that's how it became carnivore for me. It was literally just like I had to flip a switch. And then I was able to just kind of stick with it. Now, there have been times where I have fallen off the wagon. People do.
Mhm.
That's what we do as
Mhm.
humans, and we think we can do it for just one meal or just one day. And it turns into 3 or 4 days or a week. And that's hard. It's hard to rebound from that. But it can be done. And so, yeah, so for me, it was out of necessity that I became a
Mhm.
carnivore. It wasn't to
Yeah,
be healthy. It wasn't even really to lose weight at that point for me. And then it became about losing weight later. And then, of course, switch to being trying to be 100% healthy.
that's right. you have a you really did a good job of kind of sharing what this ideal of binge eating is, and I think for everybody who's checking this out, particularly if any of this sounds like you, if you're listening, or you see a family member struggling, and
Mhm,
you see them binging,
mhm,
over consuming a large quantity of food in a short period of time, they may need help.
mhm,
When we think about bulimia, we think about those who have this, they're just regularly, secretively having bouts of overeating, which is binging, and some people have self-induced vomiting, where they
mhm,
just vomit or purge, and they have this. Sometimes they get on a strict diet, etc. But the bottom line is, if you know anybody in your life that's having any of these symptoms, if it sounds familiar, if you're not sure, do more research, but let's make sure they get some help. I'm not sure how effective the organizations that support this are. All I know is that you need help. And I don't just think about help in terms of, low carb, keto, carnivore, and carnivore in this case. I think about mental health support. I think about just think about all the areas of your life that need support. So I think that's really important to say out loud. I'm sure with you having a big crew, you probably get support, but how did they respond to you turning into this wild animal eating like a carnivore? What did they say to that?
They think it's crazy, honestly, most of the time. They're burned out. They're burned out on me and all of my nutrition advice over the years, and somebody I interviewed said that to me one day about how his family was just really burned out,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
totally it was like that was when I took a step back and tried to look at it the way they see it, and I don't blame them a bit for being burnt out.
Hmm.
I mean, I have
Hmm.
literally pushed I mean, there were for months, I my kids and well, my 2 youngest, and the other 2 a little bit, but specifically the 2 youngest and my husband and I drank celery juice every morning per the medical
Mm.
medium because I thought it was good for us, and they that was hard. If you've never had celery juice, it is very difficult. You can't put like, supposedly, in order to get all the benefits, you can't put lemon juice in it to dilute it. Has to be just straight celery juice. So, I would get up in the morning and I would get out like 3 whole packs of celery and wash them all, and I would juice them fresh, and we would all stand around in the kitchen and make a face and just, like, chug this nasty, disgusting celery juice. So, I can't blame them for being burned out, listening to me count Weight Watchers points for years, and it
Right.
had always been, I try to be careful, and not talk about it, like it's not always about losing weight. It was always, like, about being healthier. We used to watch The Biggest Loser, but it was about watching these people get healthier, not about watching them lose weight, because I didn't want my kids to have the same thing in their heads that I've had, my whole life.
Hmm.
My sister was bulimic, my mom was an alcoholic, my dad a drug addict, and so I didn't want them to have all that stuff in their head, so it was always about being healthy, not about losing weight, and so the celery juice was about health. The juice fasts that I did were about detoxing. Everything was about being healthier, but in the back of my head, it was about losing weight. I just didn't say that out loud. But they are burned out on it. They are burned out
Yeah.
of hearing me talk about my 24 or 36-hour fasts. They are burned out on, now they're burned out on hearing me talk about ribeye and hamburger and how good they are for you. So I don't blame them. My husband is mostly carnivore most of the time. He does feel better eating this way, and he knows that. And so he mostly is. And the kids, the 2 that still eat with us all the time, they eat whatever meat we're eating, and then they eat, something else. But if they don't want what we're eating, they're just kind of on their own. I'm not gonna make 2 whole
Hmm.
meals, every
Right.
night, and they're old enough, they're 15 and 17. If they want something different, they fix it.
That's right.
And so, yeah, so there's a balance, there needs to be a balance, and my family, yeah, they think I'm a little bit nuts, especially in the beginning, but it was a really long time before anybody noticed, really,
Hmm.
because I had always such weird eating habits anyway with all the different diets that I had done, but because of my taste and smell issue, that made it I just announced it that this was all I could eat, and so this was all I was eating, and just nobody really noticed. I was still making a side item to go with whatever meat I was making, and they just didn't notice.
They
I
just
mean, we're
didn't
really
notice.
busy. They play basketball and volleyball, and so we're gone a lot, and we're busy, and we don't always eat at the table. Even though we homeschool, there are large communities of homeschoolers. People don't usually know that. There are large communities, and we stay super busy to the point where, like I said, we have to cut back on things sometimes.
Hmm.
So, we're so busy that sometimes we just eat like on our own. Like the kids will grab something, while I'm upstairs getting ready, and then I come downstairs and I'll eat something while they're getting ready, and then we're out the door. So it took a while before anybody noticed what I was actually doing. And when I started talking about it openly, they were like, "What?
I know, yeah.
What? Carnivore? What is that?" Like that was hard, but but I'm pretty confident in it because I feel so good and because it's healed me so much. I'm pretty confident in it, so that makes it a lot easier.
That's cool. So hearing that they were kind of tired of
Mhm.
hearing another, what's the next thing you're doing? I kind of got some of that too because I was so interested in being healthy and making sure my babies were healthy that I was constantly seeking knowledge, right?
Right.
So, so I'm saying this out loud intentionally as I think about others in the world who are doing the same. So that's why I'm so respectful of vegans, for example. They tend to be people who are just seeking truth, trying to find answers. They went down that rabbit hole. I certainly went down it myself
Mhm.
previously, and it was really done out of trying to be healthy. Now for me, that's what it was, but then of course you start thinking about being humane to animals and other things that come into play. But one thing we have to do in society is just be respectful, know that people have good intentions, they're trying to be healthy, and even when your family members seeming like they're all over the place. They're just doing experiments, and hopefully, when they find an experiment that works, they'll stick with it. And I think that's what we're doing. We found something that works for us. For me,
Mhm.
it's carnivore. For my wife, it's ketovore, and she never had the kind of control as a type 1
Mhm.
person with diabetes that she has now. It's
Mhm.
just completely different, and I just think that's what we have to do. So I appreciate that. One of the things I thought would be helpful during this episode of the podcast is just to talk a little bit about, people are going to have a lot of fear. I literally had a couple of patients yesterday, day before this recording, who again came in very inspired to do a plant-based diet. And then I always respect it, but I always ask, what their why is. And sometimes their why are things that I can clarify. And there was another African American male doctor who this young lady was following, and he was definitely more of a plant-based doc. And I said, well, let's talk about what are we trying to solve. And in her case, it was the blood pressure. So I said, had you heard about the DASH diet versus keto study
Mhm.
that just came out last summer? And did you know that although a plant-based diet may help, that this is an option for those who want to continue eating animals. So I'm always kind of, juggling and wrestling. But again, if they say to me, Doc, I just want to do this, I'm good. And I'll support them and provide whatever they need to make sure it's safe.
Mhm.
So one of the things that comes up, we regularly talk about is this increased risk for developing heart disease, and this concern about not eating too much saturated fat. Obviously, the steaks can be fatty, particularly the ribeye. People worry that that's going to elevate their cholesterol. So you've been having the opportunity to talk to people about different topics along these lines. So what would you say to somebody that comes to you and say, "Hey, I'm concerned about that"? How do you approach that conversation?
I tell them to read Nina Teicholz's The Big Fat Surprise because that book is life-changing. I've read it. I've listened to it on audiobook 5 times, and I interviewed Nina, and I think she's amazing. I think that
Amazing.
the research that she did for that book, I think it was 8 years of research, and
Yeah.
she's not a carnivore, so you can't look at it and
Right.
say, "Well, she's a carnivore, so she's biased." Because if I wrote a book, it would absolutely be biased towards
Right.
carnivore, but
Right.
that's not how it started, and you could say that, and that would be fine because it would be true.
That's
But
true.
she's not a carnivore. She was not a carnivore and never has been a carnivore. And I mean, unless she's tried it recently or I missed it, but I haven't heard of her ever having been a carnivore. So when she started, she was eating what she thought was healthy. She wasn't like necessarily following guidelines, but she was eating light foods like salads and lots of vegetables and things like that because that's how women are supposed to eat. And she was just put on a story by her publisher to do these reviews for restaurants, and she ended up reviewing
Mhm.
lots of restaurant food that was really high fat, really rich foods, and she started losing weight, and she was like, "Wait, why is
Mhm.
this?" And so she started researching and found that the reason that we're all so afraid of saturated fat and we're so afraid of heart disease is because of one man, and his name is Ansel Keys. And if you want to hear more about that, definitely get that book. But he basically was just so loud about
Mm-hmm.
it. And it was always a hypothesis and
Mm.
never proven. He went to multiple countries and did all of these studies. And then somehow, when he reported on the studies, he managed to leave out the things that didn't go along with his study. They called it the 7 country study. It was actually something like 20 something countries that they studied, right? It wasn't just 7, but he chose to only report on the 7 countries because those were the ones that went along with his hypothesis.
That's right.
And he just never acknowledged the arguments about it. And because he was so loud and got certain people behind him, that's when the food pyramid was created. That's when people started eating more processed foods. That's when people stopped eating so much meat. That's when people started limiting their salt intake. It was like all of these things happened because of that. And now that we know what we know about pharmaceutical companies and things like that, the reason the high blood pressure number used to be 150, that top number used to be one, or the bottom number used to be 150, was that was just what was considered safe. But then the pharmaceutical companies start pressuring the insurance companies to lower that number, right? So then it was 140 for a while was the
Mm-hmm.
safe number. And anybody over 140, even people who had a steady blood pressure of that number being, 140 or 145 and were healthy otherwise, started having to take medication because the insurance companies were saying, well, you have to take it because your blood pressure, or the doctors were saying you have to take it because your blood pressure is 145. And then now the number is like 120, which is ridiculous. So somebody who has a really good blood pressure of 130 ends up they want them to go on a medication when their blood pressure has been 130 for the last 20 years. It's ridiculous. And people don't realize that all of this is intertwined. It is all connected. The pharmaceutical companies pressure the insurance companies who lower the number, and then the doctors are writing more prescriptions, and it's all connected. And the food industry is the same way, except this time it was influenced by somebody named Ansel Keys. And he
That's
had
right.
all of these people backing him because he went to the right people. He was loud and he went to the right people and he didn't back down. And like, he was fighting about it. He
Mm.
wanted this to be true.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just not. There is a Harvard study from a couple of years ago where they did basically a carnivore diet on the study. It's the only one. So that's the thing, is people will say, oh, but they study meat diets and and they're not good for you. They cause us heart disease. They go
Mm-hmm.
into all this stuff, but those meat studies are a hamburger on a bun with seed oil mayonnaise or vegetable oil mayonnaise with the fries that are fried in vegetable oil along with a milkshake or a full sugar soda. And so that is not a meat diet. And that's really
Mm-hmm.
unfair because they will study a vegan diet and a vegetarian diet like it's fine, but they won't study a meat only carnivore diet because they say it's unethical. How is it unethical compared to a vegan diet? To me, it's exactly the same thing. And there are many willing participants that would do that. There are many
That's
of us, there are thousands of us that would say, I will absolutely keep a food journal. I will take a picture of everything. I mean, I would be in depth about this. If I had to go somewhere for somebody to watch me eat for 30 days, I would totally do that to be a part of a study that is
that's right.
really just an all meat diet. If it needed to be completely controlled in a hospital, I would totally sacrifice my life for 30 days to prove that. That's how strongly I feel about it because of what it has done for me and because of what it has done for you and your wife and Kelly
That's
Hogan and
right.
Sean Baker and Anthony
That's
Chafee
right.
and Laura
That's
Spath
right.
and all of my other friends, Courtney Luna and Jesselyn Randall, like all of my friends that I've met online, the impact that it has had on all of our lives make it so that it would be worth it for me to give up stuff, to give up part of my
That's
life
right.
to go. I just wish they would do that kind of a study. So I know I got kind of in a circle there. I got intertwined with my topics there, but I think that people need to understand the thing about saturated fat, the thing about heart disease, the way things are influenced. I mean, once you go down this rabbit hole, it's really hard to come back out with the same
That's right.
feelings that you went in with. And it's
That's right.
important for those of you that are about to go do some research and about to look up some studies and stuff, make sure when you look up those studies, you look up who's funding them too, because something like 80% of the time, there's a favorable outcome on a
That's
study
right.
for the person who funded the study. So, like if Coca Cola funds a study on the effects of sugar on the human body, it is going to be a favorable outcome towards Coca Cola. And the
That's right.
outcome of the sugar study will be that sugar is not that bad for you, that
That's right.
that fat is still bad for you or whatever. It's most of the time the study is going to come out favorable. So don't just read a headline. If you start doing some
Mhm.
research and you see a headline, don't just read the headline. Click on where the headline came from, because most of the time that story was also run in multiple other newspapers or magazines, and the headline will be different in every newspaper
That's
and in
right.
every magazine because it'll be skewed towards what they want the story to say.
That's
But if
right.
you actually go into the studies and look at them, a lot of times you will find that it's just a snippet that they use for the headline and for the
Mhm.
article, and the study actually doesn't say what they say in the headline at all.
That's right.
And that's
That's
very
right.
confusing for the public to see, and it's very confusing. So again, go and look at those studies and then dig deeper and look at who funded those studies, because it's really important that we know these things. The only way we can send a message is to have this information in our back pockets. And so I highly recommend that book, and I highly recommend doing your own research.
Thank you for that. And one of the things I learned as a healthcare leader is that the leaders tend to read similar things.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're into nutrition and you want to understand nutrition science and get that historical foundation, I think Nina Teicholz, we definitely want to shout out her and her book. And I'll make sure to put the big fat surprise in the video and podcast notes. Another thing I'll put in the notes, because I was recently invited by her and a team that she's working with to honor Dr. Sarah Holberg. They're having a legacy course focused on diabetes to honor her, but to kind of talk about how diabetes is reversible.
Mm-hmm.
And my role is to talk about what do I do in a clinical setting when I'm faced with a patient with diabetes. So I'm gonna make sure there's a link to that. I think the date is around February the 24th. It's
Okay.
virtual, so that'll be something that we'll be sharing. But again, I think her and Gary Tobbs, they're journalists who have actually made bigger impacts in this space than probably anybody, because they've kind of, you know, removed the veil and helped us see a little bit better what's really going on. So
Mm-hmm.
let's touch a little bit on the ideal of eating keto or carnivore. If you just Google that, there may be concerns about vitamin and mineral deficiencies. Some people feel restrictive diets. We don't consider it restrictive, but
Mm-hmm.
some people do.
Mm-hmm.
They feel that it's if you don't have the plants is where you get your vitamins from, and if you don't eat those things, how are you going to get your vitamin C and your other nutrients? So obviously, we don't feel like we're deficient in nutrients, but how do you address that question when people are concerned about nutrient deficiencies?
Well, it's been almost 3 years and I don't have scurvy yet.
That's right.
So
Okay.
that's good. And I don't have gout. So that's good. And that's because those things are not actually caused by meat.
They're
So
not.
I don't usually take vitamin C. My vitamin C has not, I have blood work done on a yearly basis. And the
Hmm.
first year I went in as a carnivore. So I was juicing a lot. I was eating lean meats, lots of like 75% of my plate was vegetables, very few fruits because of the sugar. And
Hmm.
I was eating what would be considered an extremely healthy diet. I've always been considered a health nut. So I am not somebody who was coming from the sad diet. I had always been considered a health nut and always been like the granola crunchy mom in whatever crowd you're in. And so I went to the doctor, had my blood work done in February, got the results back in March. And in May, I started the carnivore diet. Okay. So
Hmm.
my blood work that time was not very good. The doctor gave me, he's a kind of a naturopath. He doesn't want to write prescriptions if he doesn't have to. Told me he hasn't prescribed a statin in like 22 years. The insurance companies have actually come to him and wanted to know why he's not writing as many prescriptions
Yeah.
as other people. And he says, well, because I try to get my patients healthy in other ways, you know. So, but I did need multiple supplements that year on a juicing diet and mostly, vegetable diet with lean meats. I needed many supplements. I'm always deficient in D and always have been, even at the end of summer, like when I've been outside for several hours a day, every day, basically in the summer, I'm always a little bit deficient in D. So
Hmm.
he said, I'm probably just going to need vitamin D forever. So I do take vitamin D.
Yeah.
And that time was no different. I think my vitamin D was like 30 and he really wants it closer to 100, he says. Most doctors, I think it's like 40 or 50, which
Yeah.
also is too
Yeah.
low, even though that's the reference range for most doctors. So
Yeah.
I try to keep mine high. And I can tell when it's getting low too. If I forget to take it, I can tell, after a month or so, I can tell that I'm not taking it. But anyway, so I was deficient in many things. He had to give me, like mentholated supplements. He had to give me all these supplements and vitamins. And when I ran out, I just kind of quit taking them because I didn't want to go back and get more. And I didn't feel bad. I didn't feel like I needed them because where do those numbers even come from? Where do those reference ranges even come from? Who came up with the USRDA, right? I don't even know I don't even know why those numbers are those numbers, and do I trust it if I already don't trust the pharmaceutical company and the normal conventional advice from doctors to basically they really think the SAD diet is okay. And so,
Mhm.
and it's obviously not. If you look around, most people are eating that way, and if that's normal, I don't want to be normal. So
Right.
like 10 months go by before I go back in. And I didn't want to tell him that I was a carnivore. Like I was nervous about telling him. I thought he might like kick me out of his practice. I was a little bit nervous. So I told him I was eating a very low carb diet. And
Mhm.
he looked at my blood work and he closed the file and he said, "Well, there's nothing I can do for you. Everything looks great." And I said, "That's interesting because I only eat meat." And he said, "Well, keep doing what you're doing." He just kind of dismissed it.
Wow.
And so I was like, okay. And I got out to the car and I was just like, I sat in the car looking over my blood work again. I was so excited that my blood work was good for the first time, that I can remember my
Wow.
blood work was so good. And so when I went back last year, I was a little bit deficient in B, which is fairly normal if you're not supplementing with B, on the carnivore diet.
Mhm.
That does happen
Yeah.
to some people. And so I've been taking a vitamin B and I still take my D, and that's pretty much it. Now, my hormones are a little
Mhm.
bit out of whack because I turned 50 last year. So my hormones are a little bit out of whack. I did start supplementing with a low dose of hormones about
Mhm.
3 or 4 months ago. And I think that that's helping me, and I'm willing to do that. It's bioidentical
Absolutely.
hormones. And so I'm willing to do that. So I'm doing that, but not everybody, has that issue. So the only thing that I was a little bit deficient in was B and D, which I'm
Okay.
taking now. And I'm kind of excited. I go back in for blood work in a week and a half, and I'm kind of excited to see what it shows this time. My iron was good, like everything else was good. And so I do
Mhm.
know some people do end up with some minor deficiencies here and there, but
That's right.
again, that depends on what you believe is a deficiency, right? I mean, if you feel good and your blood pressure is good, and even if your cholesterol is a little bit out of whack on the carnivore diet, if that
Right.
is your only marker of something being wrong, there's nothing wrong, right? Like
That's right.
you can't just have the one thing and say, "Oh my goodness, you're going to die. You're going to have to take a bunch of medications." I don't think that's not fair, and that's what they try to do. And so, so for me, I would like to go in for a CAC score. I haven't done that yet, but I would
Yes.
like to do that at some point, which is a calcium score for your arteries. So I would like to do that at some point. But other than that, yeah, like I because I have done so much research. I'm not an expert by any means, but honestly, I know more about nutrition than your standard
Oh, yeah.
doctor who doesn't
No
specialize in
question.
nutrition. And even the ones who do specialize in nutrition, I
That's
feel like
right.
because they don't specialize in real nutrition, even nutrition
Right.
schools are sometimes funded. Even the American Academy the word just left my head.
Like the nutrition associations, is
Yeah,
that what you're
yeah.
thinking about?
Even
Okay.
they get some of their funding from the big food companies.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Like, you have to be so careful with stuff like
That's
that.
right.
The
That's
the
right.
information that comes from a school that is funded by a big food company is gonna be favorable. They're gonna give that information. They're always gonna say to basically eat the standard American diet, but the healthy version of that. And so I do believe that because of the research that I have done, I am in this all day, every day. When I'm not schooling the kids, when we're not at basketball or volleyball, I've got an AirPod in and I'm listening to something. I'm listening to a podcast. I'm listening to a YouTube channel. I'm getting information from you and all the other doctors who I believe and trust more than I would trust most doctors, because
Yeah.
most doctors, half at least, are in the same boat as the regular American public. They are sick, they are overweight, they have autoimmune diseases, they are taking medications. And I would much rather listen to 15 experts that I found online, of whom take no medications, are my age or older, and are even healthier than I am.
That's
Right? I
right.
mean, I would much rather be a part of that community than if you went around and randomly chose, probably, this is hypothetical, of course, but if you went around and randomly chose 15 doctors from my area, chances
Right.
are the doctors that I have found online and the community leaders in the carnivore community, chances are going to be healthier than the random doctors that I choose from my area to have their health tested.
That's right. And I think you're right. You've really hit a lot of great points. And it is true that the education in nutrition is still flawed. And I had some robust discussions when I got my master's in nutrition. So even when you go get this education, if you're getting it from sources that are biased,
Mhm.
it's a problem. Some people will go to the Nutrition Network because they will at least frame things through the lens of some very strong evidence, and if you're interested in low carb, they'll frame it through that lens. So I
Mhm.
think that's really important. You said something in the beginning of your comments, you know, that they knew that the doctor had prescribed or hadn't prescribed statins. And I thought that was profound. That is true. I remember when the drug reps would come in and ask me about medicines, but they already knew if I prescribed the medicines or not. They already knew.
Mhm.
And that's really scary. So your health system knows, which is
Mhm.
probably appropriate because it's a team sport and we're trying to not have too much variation between the docs. But when the pharmaceutical and the drug reps know, and then they try to entice you to
Mhm.
use those meds, I have a little bit of a problem with that.
Mhm.
And I also recall you mentioning the RDA. And yes, when those recommendations occur, those recommendations are based on you know, comparing the needs of a person on the standard American diet with what they think is a minimum requirement, right? But when you start changing your dietary pattern, no matter what direction you're going in, your needs are going to vary. And that's why, as you have suggested, we need research. What's normal for a carnivore? What's normal for a vegan? And you then align what's normal with the needs of that. I can tell you right now, a vegan needs B12, they need
Mhm.
vitamin D, they need omega 3, they need zinc, they need, we can go down that list. But what is it for a carnivore? And I appreciate the fact that you're comfortable with supplements. If I have a specific need, for example, I don't eat a lot of seafood, I will then take omega 3. I mean, and do you kick me out of the carnivore community because I'm supplementing? I mean, that's
No.
ridiculous. So it's okay to take omega 3 if you need that. I take
Mhm.
vitamin
Mhm.
D3 with K2 because besides the fact that everybody's deficient with dark skin, I have to think about it even more. And sometimes I do electrolytes if I'm crampy or concerned. I use Keto Chow's. They have a new salt
Yeah, I've seen that
electrolyte.
one.
There's a different brands out there. I just use them a lot because I really love the fact that they support the low carb community. So,
Yes.
so everything makes sense. Be individualized as you make decisions. Don't get caught up in the cults and do what's best for your particular situation. One of the things that affected me personally was GI things,
Mhm.
and it's so funny when people they say, well, you don't want to eat like that because that's bad for your microbiome. It's bad for your stomach. You may get constipated. Some people worry that they're going to get diarrhea, but you're not going to eat any fiber. So let's talk a little bit briefly about what's been your experience as personally or when you talk to people about the gut issue and whether or not this diet will help that.
Well, it's so varied. A lot of people that have had continuous gut issues, like, even most of their lives, when they do this, it fixes it for them. I
Mm-hmm.
did have some pretty bad GI issues in the beginning for about it was a long time. It was a long time. It was probably somewhere between 4 and 6 months, but I was
Mm-hmm.
determined to stick with this because I felt like it was working for me. I
Mm-hmm.
felt like my brain was so clear. It took, I think I like things to be kind of compartmentalized, and so for me, this put all my food in a box, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
these are the things I can eat, and so while it seems restrictive to other people, it was not restrictive to me because I was so used to being restrictive. This feels like freedom to me. And so even though I was having such terrible stomach issues, it was, a couple of times a day I would have to run to the bathroom, but by the time it was over, that's it, it was over,
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it was worth it. A lot of people have issues just for a week or something, while things kind of normalize. I think for me, it was so long because my system was so messed up from all the ways, that all the things that I had done over the years, the juicing and the, vegan, vegetarian, plant based. I mean, oh, the things I have made, oh, the concoctions I have made. So I think my stomach was just like, oh, I don't understand what's happening here. But now I have no issues at all ever. Unless I eat too much dairy, sometimes I have a little bit of a problem, but I have no issues ever. My body is happy. My stomach is happy. My gut seems really happy. I don't ever get a stomach ache. I'm never gassy. I'm never bloated. And so, that's worth something. So even if you're having a little bit of a stomach problem, don't let that negate the good benefits that are happening, because that goes away.
And it's so cool when it goes away. And I'm willing to do anything. You said you'd be willing to be in the study and sacrifice your time and life to get the carnivore message out. But certainly people should be willing to sacrifice a week or two. And most people who have keto flu, and with that, you can get those same symptoms with carnivore. Those symptoms generally go away within a week or two. Some people will mitigate it with electrolytes and other interventions, but for the most part, I have rarely found people who use that as the only reason why they can't do the diet. And what I try to do as a clinician is I tell them in advance, this may happen. If
Right.
it happens, it's okay. It's not an intolerance. It's just
Right.
you not maybe having enough acid, and your body has to adapt to that. So here's the thing, here's something you can do for the acid, but most people don't need to do anything other than just to be patient. You
That's
don't
right.
have to make this. That's what was cool about eating this animal-based diet, is that it's so simple in a way. It's
Hmm.
easy. You don't have to think about much. You have to argue with people at restaurants. I was ordering some. I just didn't want to cook breakfast, and I said, let me just, for Valentine's Day, let me just get some Denny's. But so
Uh-huh.
when I called, I said I don't eat anything but animals, right? And so we have to, let's put something together. I'll do a la carte.
Uh-huh.
And he just kept saying, well, what about the potatoes? What about the biscuit? What about the pancakes? Are you sure? Are you sure? And then he kept, well, do you, I know they have a standard thing they have to say, do you want dessert?
Yeah.
I said, listen, if it's not an animal, and I was shocked when I got the order, everything was fine.
Oh,
But it
awesome.
took like this extra
Yeah.
conversation to get them to
Hmm.
understand where I was going. So,
Yeah.
but let's touch base about protein. Obviously, we're talking about an animal-based diet. That sounds like a lot of protein,
Hmm.
and many people worry about, is that gonna, be a problem? We like it because it satiates us. It reduces cravings. You talked about your life with bulimia and binging, and how you just don't need to get nowhere near anything that would tempt you, and the meat solve that problem. But what about concerns around the protein affecting the kidneys? And when you're talking to
Hmm.
your community, how often does that come up?
People ask sometimes, "Isn't that too much protein?" And I just say, you know what? Try it. Give it 30
Right.
days. Like try it. I direct them to Ken Berry, and I direct them to
That's right.
Dr. Chafee. I direct them
That's
to
right.
you, because you guys are kind of the experts and you can explain it a lot better than I can. But the protein is not an issue. And even people who are eating the standard American diet, if you're eating as much meat as they recommend, you should be worried about that too then.
Right.
You know what I mean? But it's so funny how people will worry about the meat and your stomach or your kidneys, or whatever, but when they are stopping at McDonald's and getting a, bacon, egg, and cheese biscuit, they're not worried about that at all. They're not worried about
No.
the Shamrock Shake that just came out at McDonald's again this year. They're not worried about those things, but they're worried about a little bit too much protein for your kidneys. I mean,
Right.
just think about that for a
I know.
minute.
It's
Just
like,
think about how absurd that sounds when you open up your mouth and say, "Isn't that too much protein?"
that's
For
right.
what? Too much
That's right.
protein is one of the building blocks of life. How could it be too much protein? So, like, don't question me. I'm sorry, but don't question me about my mostly natural carnivore
That's
diet
right.
when you're drinking soda and milkshakes from McDonald's or something, and you're eating happy meals, or your kids are eating happy meals, or you're eating the entire burger with the bun, with the fries and a milkshake, or stopping at Dunkin' Donuts on your way to work to get one of those sweet coffees that has 185 grams of sugar in it. Isn't that too much sugar? Isn't that too
That's
much
right.
sugar for you? Like, that's what I'm gonna start saying. When people say, "Isn't that too much protein for your kidneys?" I'm gonna say, "What did you have for breakfast?" And then I'm going to ask them if that's too much sugar. I mean, it's just because it's ridiculous. Those cups are more than halfway filled with sugar, and people think nothing about that.
That's
So
right.
don't ask me if my meal is too much protein, and don't even ask yourself if your meal is too much protein if you're also eating things like that. If you are eating the standard American diet, don't ask
Hmm.
me if it's too much protein for your kidneys, because what you're eating is too much sugar and too much carbs for the amount of insulin that your body can create. I
That's
mean,
right.
that's where the real problem is. So let's not talk about too much protein for your kidneys here, because that's ridiculous.
It is. And the irony of your comments is that the number one cause of dialysis and kidney failure is diabetes. So a logical person could then say, huh, so if the number one cause
Hmm.
of kidney failure is diabetes, that sounds like a sugar excess problem,
Right,
not
doesn't
a
it?
protein.
Yeah.
So therefore, instead of taking medicines to protect your kidneys, like the ACE inhibitors and the
Hmm.
ARBs, like lisinopril, losartan as examples, instead of even taking all these supplements, how about if we just get rid of the poison, which is
Hmm.
excessive
Good
carbs?
point.
So if you get rid of that, you'll find that that will actually, for most people, unless it's too far down the road, they can actually improve their kidney function and heal. And Dr. David Unwin in the UK has done research, and others, but his, if you search that, you'll find that in a 7-year randomized trial, he was able to show your kidney function for people with diabetes got better with a low carb diet, not even keto or carnivore, it's just a low
Hmm.
carb diet. So we already know if you remove the thing that causes the problem, you'll solve a lot of problems. So
Hmm.
what I want to do as we get close to wrap up, because it's Valentine's Day, and you and I have people we love who
Hmm.
expect to see us very soon. So,
That's right.
I want to wrap up with just a broad question about if you were capable of changing the world from a nutrition perspective, what would you want the world to look like maybe 10 years from now?
I don't think everybody needs to be a carnivore. I don't think everybody needs to eat the way I'm eating. And I mean, just to be clear, if I started to not feel good, if I started to have health issues, I am not married to the carnivore diet. It is not a cult. If I started having problems, I would get out. I am not going to stand by this until I die, even if it's at an early age, because I'm harming my body. If I
Hmm.
realize there's something wrong here, I will totally get out. And so I think that not everybody needs to be carnivore. I do think everybody should do carnivore for 30 days, 60 days. A lot of people do it for 30 days and then decide to go
Hmm.
longer because they feel so good. So I do think everybody should do it for 30, 60, 90 days. And I think everybody should land at a really good, clean, like ketovore or keto area. And I would
Yeah.
love to
Yeah.
see that in the world in the next 10 years. I would love to see more people making that change. And I would love to see more people eating one or two ingredient foods. I mean, that's really where the trouble comes in, isn't it? Is the list of foods that's this long on the back of a package of something that is this big. When the list of ingredients is so long, that's where the problem comes in. So if you want to eat some fresh homemade sourdough bread and you don't notice a problem when you eat it, once you've cleaned up your diet and
That's
maybe
right.
done carnivore or ketovore or something for 30 or 60 days, and then you want to add in some fresh homemade sourdough bread and you don't notice any negative effects when you eat it, by all means, you eat the fresh sourdough bread, because you know how many ingredients that has in it? Just a few,
Yeah.
right?
That's right.
So you
That's
want to
right.
add stuff like that back in. You want to make homemade pasta or buy some all natural, pasta somewhere that has one or two ingredients that's minimally processed, fine, do that.
That's right.
But
That's
other
right.
than that, eat low carb fruits, the lower carb fruits, like lots of berries, eat the lower carb vegetables. So a potato every now and then, but not very often. If you even want to eat a little bit of white rice later on,
Hmm.
after you have already
Hmm.
eliminated everything, this is
That's
for
right.
me, this is my opinion, is eliminate everything, add things back in one or two at a time so you can see if something bothers you. Is it tedious? Maybe. But how well do you want to be? Because so many people have autoimmune diseases, so many people are
That's
so
right.
sick. If you cut out everything except the meat for 30 or 60 days,
Mm,
most of your health problems are going to disappear. They are going to disappear. Now,
that's
that's
right.
not a good time to have your cholesterol checked, because your cholesterol a
Right.
lot of times does go up in the beginning, but
That's right.
usually it levels back out. So, and
That's
again,
right.
If everything else goes away, but your cholesterol is a little bit elevated, so what? If everything else goes away and you're off your blood pressure medication and you're off your insulin and your swelling has gone away and you've lost 50 or 60 pounds, so what if your cholesterol is a little bit high? Because obviously your all your other markers are good, your inflammation is going to be down. So I would love to see everybody at a really clean keto
Hmm.
place forever and get
Mm.
rid of the middle sections of the grocery store because we don't need them. Everything that
Garbage.
you eat should either come from the ground or an animal, or it should be something that you have put some ingredients together to make at your house so that it doesn't have that huge long list of ingredients that are making you sick. I just think the seed and vegetable oils, the sugar, and the ultra processed foods are killing us.
That's
They are
right.
quite literally killing us. And if you didn't want to be keto and you didn't want to be carnivore, but you still cut out the vegetable and seed oils like the
Mhm.
cottonseed oil, sunflower seed oil, anything that says vegetable oil on it, canola oil, if you cut those out along with the processed, prepackaged foods
That's
and
right.
actual sugar, your life will change.
It will
So
change.
maybe you don't agree with keto, maybe you don't agree with carnivore, maybe you don't want to do those. Eat more protein and cut out those processed food, sugar, and vegetable oils, and literally your life will change. And it will happen quickly too. You don't think it's a big deal, but it'll happen very quickly. The getting sick
That's
is
right.
slow. The getting
That's
better
right.
can be pretty quick.
That's right. Thank you. Great answer to that question. And again, I like your perspective. It's aligned with mine, which is meet people where they are in terms of
Mhm.
not going, you don't have to go to carnivore, but absolutely need to do an experiment, listen to your body. And it's okay to add back so that you can enjoy some of the things you've enjoyed as long as they're not causing harm. So if I have a ketovore day,
Mhm.
it'll be with something that I know doesn't cause harm. So I just think that's logical
Right.
and very practical. So, but there are other aspects of this journey, which is why I have my nest and rope. And I want you to think about, other than what we've talked about so far, any other aspects of your life, whether it's the exercise, stress, or relationships, that you're going to focus on over the next 12 months.
So, first of all, to hit your point from the very beginning, from your opening, I do not believe in New Year's resolutions. I think New Year's resolutions just set yourself up for failure. And I'm
Yep,
not saying that just because I have failed at my New Year's resolutions my whole life and I'm just a failure. It's because it happens to most people. And then what ends
that's
up
right.
happening is you get to the end of that first month or first week. Sometimes it's the first day for people, and you
I
think,
know.
oh, forget it. I'll wait until next Monday, or I'll wait until February 1st, or I'll wait, then it ends up being like June or July. And people really do, even in June or July, start saying, I'll just wait until January 1st. So I
That's
think
right.
that's a mistake. I think you have to set up small, attainable goals that you can set yourself up for success with. So weekly
Yep.
goals, monthly goals, something like that I think is best. So for me, for this year, I have made a special effort to do some cold plunging. I'm trying to do that every day. I've heard such amazing things about it for inflammation, muscle and joint pain,
That's right.
mood, endorphins, dopamine, all kinds of things. And so I've been trying to do that every day. I'm grounding, which I used to think was like, hokey. And so I'm, going for a walk as the sun comes up every day so I can get that light in my eyes. I'm not using my phone at all except like to start my audiobook and then to start my timer when I get in the cold plunge. Those are the only times I'm using my phone in the morning before like 9 o'clock. And I'm getting
Hmm.
up at 6 or 6:30. So that's quite a while of being awake before I'm even using my phone. And I'm eating breakfast, which I usually kind of fast through, trying to get my
Hmm.
circadian rhythm set, trying to heal my body. I usually don't eat until 1 or 2 in the afternoon. And sometimes it's just two small meals. I have a feeling I just have a habit of not eating enough, so I have a feeling that's what I've been doing to myself, causing extra stress on my body, extra cortisol. So I'm combining all of those things, eating breakfast, the grounding, the natural light in my eyes and the cold plunging every morning, and hoping that, that's going to just help me with everything all around, and having that routine in the morning. And I have not veered off of it in almost 2 weeks. I have done it every single day. And so I think that's helping me. I've done all of those things every single day. I've been cold plunging for about a month now, maybe a little bit more. And so those are things that I want to stick with. I want to keep listening to and reading nutrition books and things like that. I think that's so important to do that. I mean, that's starting to do those things is how I found Nina's book. And so I always encourage people to find some of those like self help or nutrition books in the space that you're kind of exploring, and read those and see what you think
Hmm.
about them. So I just want to keep learning. I want to keep doing those things for myself in the morning, make sure I'm moving my body, and make sure that I'm eating really good quality foods that only have one or two ingredients. I'd like to stick with that all year. And I'm having my blood work done again. So that'll be good to, to kind of confirm what I already know, which is that I'm doing great and the carnivore diet is working for my body.
That's wonderful. A lot of areas of focus, but I think in order for us to heal, which is why I have a nest and rope, we have to think about all those areas, and you just continue to work on the areas that impact you in a positive way. So I really enjoyed this conversation. I want people to continue to hear from you since you like to talk, right?
I
So we
do.
want to
I
get
love
in
to
front
talk. Can
of
you tell?
so we want to keep hearing what you because you're making it easy for people because you learn something, you share something, you learn something, and I think that makes it easy for people rather than just listening to your YouTube channel while they're driving or any other place. So is it primarily YouTube or do you have other places that people can find you?
Primarily YouTube and then Instagram. My name on Instagram is serena.carnivore, and on YouTube, it is the Carnivore Revolution. And then also on Facebook, it's Serena Musick, just my full name.
All right. Well, when I was on your channel, which will be released at some point, I told you that the person who manages my life at work is Serena
Oh,
too.
yeah.
So as I got to know you, I'm always thinking about her as we interact, and I appreciate what you're doing. I really appreciate you allowing me to be on your channel and allowing and being on my channel. I just think again, it's important that we get this message out. So thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Protecting Your Nest, Serena.
I agree 100%. Thank you for having me.
No problem. So today, guys, we spent some time thinking of some of the reasons we should not, be so concerned about adopting this low carb or keto carnivore lifestyle. And I hope Serena did a good job of explaining that. My hope is that today's conversation helped remove some of the fears, especially considering all the amazing stories of healing that we have both experienced personally and in the people that we share this with. So those healing stories are priceless. But before we started this conversation, we talked about, how difficult it is to stick with these resolutions. And Serena explained why she doesn't think that's a good idea to even have them, which I don't disagree with. We talked about having smart goals. And we also want to encourage you to, if you have goals that you have, it's okay to write it down. You want to be honest about the goals so it's reachable and make sure that you spend a little time each and every day trying to achieve your goals. So I just believe that if we're conscious of what we're trying to achieve and we make it our priority, I think we'll find ourselves in a much better place as the year wraps up towards the end of 2024. So I encourage you to keep learning, growing, and sharing the knowledge that you have. Share this information we've shared today. Go to Serena's channel, the Carnivore Revolution, and share what she's sharing. That way your friends and family can grow and learn more each and every day. So I really appreciate everybody who took their time to spend some time with us on the Protecting Your Nest podcast. And until the next episode, continue to be safe, be well, and continue to protect your nest.